why climate justice is microjustice, and let's talk about it. Climate change is often referred to as a threat multiplier. It intersects with other forces, vulnerabilities, and inequities makes them worse. When you think about it, this actually elevates the importance of building alliances and mutual aid commitments across movements. The ideal and effective response to these compounding factors needs the engagement and alignment of multiple movements, including climate and environmental justice, immigrant and Indigenous justice, racial, LGBTQ, and gender and economic justice. For its migrants, Black and Indigenous people of color, LGBTQ communities, and religious minorities who have borne the brunt of surveillance in this country and around the world. Abusive state surveillance of queer folks in the US dates back to the 1950s with the Lavender Scare, where the federal government identified and fired employees suspected of being gay. But it's also important to note that this event was one of the earliest recordings of organized advocacy for LGBTQ rights for its communities bearing the brunt of surveillance who also are fighting back. Recently, the New York Police Department was ordered to disclose thousands of records of how facial recognition technology was used against Black Lives Matter protesters after the New York Supreme Court ruled in favor of lawsuit by Amnesty International Stop and local activists. Responsible investors, labor unions, and even librarians have joined with Migrant to demand data brokers LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters to stop selling data to ICE. And recently, after a long campaign, the majority of the independent shareholders in the Thomson Reuters voted for a human rights review of their contracts with ICE. The political and corporate forces who profit from the war on immigration know that soon as people understand what is happening, their inhumane policies lose support. They know that small and bad determined groups can beat back up in powers. And on the subject of money, border violence profiteering is climate change profiteering. The latest IPCC reports are clear. The climate crisis does not care about the lines drawn on maps. Cheating safe pathways for people to move and live in dignity is essential. You know how in the environmental movement, we reject the idea of sacrifice zones from the environmental destruction? That is also important. We also need to reject the border and surveillance industry that encourages governments and investors to see borders as sacrifice zones for migrants. So let's take it back and take a deep breath. Migration has been and will always be something humans do. Early humans are thought to have migrated to Asia, either across a strait what lies between the Horn of Africa and what is now Yemen, or via Sinai Peninsula. After spreading to the Southeast Asia, early humans are thought to have migrated to Australia, which have shared a landmass with New Guinea, and at the time then to Europe, then to the Americas. Humans have moved for tens of thousands of years for every reason that has been caused and complicated by war, enslavement, and persecution. Today, migrants and refugees must not be stigmatized. If anything needs to be stigmatized, it is corporate profiteering from refugee and migration abuse. Migrants are not the problem to be solved. Safe migration and always has been part of the solution. The climate crisis and the impact of the environmental degradation fall disproportionately in the people of the global south. This is patently unfair, considering the richest 1% of the world's population cause twice as much carbon dioxide as the poorest 50% of people, and they are the ones who live overwhelmingly in the countries vulnerable to climate change, meaning that they are bearing now the brunt of the crisis they did not cause. Now, a huge industry and its investors and preventing those with people from moving to find safely. Without climate justice, there can be no migrant justice. The climate justice movement and the migrant justice movement have a common oppressor. It's a fun plot to way to take them down always together, rather than turning against our own community members and fighting for the similar goal that we are trying to achieve, which is liberation. It's vital that we continue to have these discussions because our common oppressor is the border and surveillance industry, a system that values profits, whether from carbon extraction or border violence, above human life. And that industry is connected and organized and powerful right now. The climate justice movement and the migrant justice movement must be just as connected and organized. That is how we will win against the current oppressors. Rather than cashing in on the climate crisis, it is time for the world's biggest financiers to divest from the industries that fuel and profit from it. We need to continue pushing for the understanding that climate justice is migrant justice, and without our people, we cannot liberate ourselves from this ecological crisis that we face today. So the next time that you hear, is migrant justice climate justice, say, yes, it is. And if you love this video, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How have you seen migration in the surveillance industry affect your life? I would love to know more about this information. And please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing as it continues to fund my work I do today here.